Hi, everyone. Just going to give people a couple seconds to join before we kick things off. We're slowly funneling in. Okay, let's go ahead and kick it off. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's Wednesday Wise webinar. My name is Sydney Konahia, and I am the Manager of Member Services and Retention with the International Franchise Association, and we have a great hour lined up for you all today. Before we kind of kick things off, I just wanted to touch on two things. Today's webinar will be recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed to all registrants and attendees along with the slide deck after the webinar. And if you have any questions for today's speakers, please feel free to add them to the chat or questions box, and they will address them towards the end of the session. Today's topic is Master Your Franchise Development Pipeline, and it's brought to us by FranData. Here to provide today's discussion are Edith Wiseman, President at FranData, Eric Simon, Senior Vice President of Franchise Sales and Development at the Joint Corp, and James Franks, Vice President of Franchise Recruitment at Unleashed Brands. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you again to FranData for sponsoring today's Wednesday Wise webinar. And I will now go ahead and turn things over to our speakers to get us started.
Thank you, Sydney. As she mentioned, the objective of today's Wednesday Wise webinar is to take franchisors and suppliers who are creatively growing their brands and to share that wisdom on what's working with you. And what we're going to focus on is specifically how they're targeting existing franchisee owners. My name is Edith Wiseman. I'm president of FranData, and we are a franchise-focused market research company. For purposes of today's discussion, it's helpful for you to know that we are franchisee investigators. So our objective is to have an FBI-like file on every franchisee. Ooh. And that's what allows me to share insights on mastering your franchise development pipeline with you. So I have two co-presenters here, Eric and James. Can you guys, let's start with you, James. Can you tell me a little bit about the company that you work for and what your role is?
Absolutely. Thanks, Edith. And hello, everybody. Again, my name is James Franks. I'm Vice President of Franchise Recruiting here at Unleashed Brands. And I am lucky enough to serve aside Josh Barker, and Josh Wall. I oversee the growth of three of our brands, which is Urban Air, Adventure Parks, Snapology, and XP League. We are the #1 children's enrichment platform franchisor in the United States, and we have 7 different brands, which I'll get into here shortly.
Awesome. Eric?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eric Simon, Senior Vice President of Franchise Sales and Development at the Joint Chiropractic. We are the biggest chiropractic brand worldwide, and we have about 965 units, and both corporate and franchise. We've been there since 2016, and it's been great. It's been great.
So I'm curious from both of your perspectives, why do you think this topic has attracted such a large audience today? I might add, the largest in Wednesday webinar history. We almost broke the ability for people to register, aside, of course, from each of your stunning good looks. James, would you like to give us your thoughts?
Yeah, I think with the franchise growth and with any brand, it's always that magic bullet to basically find and attract the franchisee that fits your brand the most. So we have found that by targeting different operators and franchisees through data we were able to secure through FranData, it's helped us align ourselves with the right audience.
And Eric, what do you think is drawing people here today?
I think that exactly what James said. I think also just the macro environment maybe has called many franchise advertising and lead generation audibles, so to speak, and maybe a little bit more of a strategic approach to identifying owners, whether it's multi-unit operators, whether it's owners with specific backgrounds. I think the macro environment has made people more focused on this and maybe look at things a little differently.
Okay, so you got a little taste of their wisdom, but before we get to tap into their full brain trust, I want to, and really understand how they're achieving results. I want to frame the conversation around the franchise growth market dynamics. So in preparation for our time today, what I asked from my research team is to understand the average number of new openings that happened, sorry, that slide is wrong, in 2023 by size of brand. So when you look at this, the average number of unit openings compared to the high is pretty extraordinary. So for brands that had 0 to 50 units, the average was 3 units opened, compared to the fastest with 45 units. Brands with 51 to 100 units, the average was 12 with the high of 85 units. And the average number of unit openings for franchise brands with 100 plus units was 40 with the high of 396. Now, all of these numbers exclude commercial cleaning because they're an outlier. And if we just look at brands with 100 to 1,000 units, so exclude the mega size brands, the high was slightly lower at 315. So, one of the takeaways to this chart is there's obvious advantage to size. The larger the brand, the more units you open on average. But both of the companies on this presentation have achieved amazing results. The joint averaged 112 franchise unit openings each year for the past 3 years, and Unleashed opened 113 franchise units last year. So if you're a franchise brand on this call, how do you compare to these averages? And if you're a supplier, are you growing with your franchise brand customers at the same pace that you see in this chart? I don't know about you, Eric or James, or the rest of the franchisors or folks on this call, but when I think about spectacular growth stories in franchising, I think about brands like Quiznos and TCBY, right? These are brands that seemingly came out of nowhere and then were everywhere. But when I dug into and I looked in Quiznos, they had, for example, been franchising for years before it hit its true growth spurt. So the Shaddens acquired it when they had 18 units in 2018. And 14 years after they started franchising, they hit 100 units. And then they really took off. And they had 48 area directors across the country selling franchises. I'd love to know how many of you franchise brands have 48 salespeople. Right. But if you contrast that to today, when we look at brands, the speed to 100 units is just astonishing for some brands. If we look at 3 brands that I have just examples, they achieved 100 units open and operating, not sold, but operating in 3 years. And all of these brands are kind of incredible feats because they involve not just finding franchisees to invest in, but also to find sites. Service brands can be slightly easier because you could have a franchisee that's opening multiple territories at once. But from a franchisor's perspective, this just means that there's just this increased pressure to grow market share before your competitor or a new brand that pops out of nowhere steals customers from your brand. For a supplier, it means that you have the ability to expand your business more rapidly, but you need to know who those brands are. And for a franchise development organization, you need to think about creative ways to attract prospects that can sustainably scale and grow. There has historically been this idea that, if you're in food service, like if you're a food service franchisee, you're only going to invest in food. Or a retail service brand only invests in retail service. And I think there's really good reason for this. Like if I think about it as most basic level, like when you and I go shopping, we end up buying basically the same thing in our closet, right? Why is that? Because we're creatures of habit. And we like to de-risk by going with what we know. But when you look at franchisees today, they're incredibly diversified. I was looking at a franchisee yesterday who had 17 fast casual franchises and separately owns an insurance company, a cleaning company, a real estate company, a printing company, a tire company. I won't bore you with all of them, but the total of 9 companies in one market. If you look at Dunkin', this is Dunkin' franchise. There's a lot on this slide, but what it's telling you is that there are 368 franchisees that have 5 or more locations, and 14% of them on average own 4 or more. And they own franchises in healthcare, in also in food, but in automotive, so in other diversified industries. So from a franchisor standpoint, not Dunkin', but from someone else's standpoint, this demonstrates there's a sophistication of operations, and so they have this ease of diversification. And from a supplier's standpoint, these franchisees offer an opportunity to sell across brands within one franchisee's ownership. As you can tell, I get super excited about looking at the demographics of franchisee information. So one of the exciting parts of my job is I actually get to see what a system looks like. And we'll get an opportunity to see the Unleashed brands and joints in just a moment. But if we look at Domino's, a concept that rather large, over 6,000 locations, 18% of their owners control 70% of their franchise system. So they're a much more mature brand, but this like evolution towards very large franchisees, or larger, excuse me, not very, 10 units is not very, very large, but larger franchisees that have an infrastructure. And so that's 135 franchisees that own over 4,000 locations. So for all of these reasons, many franchisors, like the companies that Eric and James work for, and suppliers, are directly targeting franchisees of other franchise systems. So now we get to the more fun part, which is hearing the stories of James and Eric. And so what I'd like to do is, James, I'm going to start with you and ask you a whole bunch of questions, and then I'm going to turn to Eric. We were supposed to have a supplier presenting with us today, but they weren't able to participate. So I'm going to give you the supplier perspective at the end before we turn to the audience Q&A. So I might be a little bit strange asking myself a question and then answering it. So just bear with me. So James, let's start with you. You shared with me that you have 2 other people who work with you, but are there how big is your department from a staffing perspective?
Yeah, great question, Edith. So we have, Josh Wall, which is our chief franchise officer, and then Josh Barker and myself, which were vice presidents that oversee the 7 branch growth. And then we have another 11 franchise recruiters that work in the franchise recruiting side of it. And then we have some other coordinating and support positions as well.
Okay, awesome. Can you share with us a little bit about your focus for growth? I know you have a lot of different brands, so what your target franchisee profiles are, or area of the countries where you're trying to grow?
Yeah, so it's really interesting with Unleashed Brands, and I think it's, when I have this conversation with folks, folks, especially when we talk about going after and targeting other existing franchisees of other brands, while we do attract large multi-unit franchisees of other brands, it's not always the case. With some of our other brands that are similar to our children's enrichment franchise categories, they may be 1 or 2 location operators in that market and done very well and been limited to growth and don't want to be remote owners. And so they're able to diversify right in their local community and, be a Goddard franchisee as well as an Urban Air Adventure Park franchisee. But we also have very large franchisees of other brands that are diversifying their portfolio. And so it's really key to understanding the audience that you're targeting, and that's where FranData came in with us with the existing franchisees. It is not always the larger franchise operator, while it is, but really knowing the audience and knowing that brand as well as you can know them from afar, of what appeals to that franchisee, why they're part of that brand, or maybe some of the challenges with that brand that you can hopefully solve for, or some of the synergies from the back of the house for that brand that you can solve for as well. So when we really targeted existing franchisees of other brands, we stood back and really tapped in some of our existing franchisees that were a part of some of these brands and asked them what they liked about joining Urban Air, for example, or Little Gym or Sylvan, and then what some of the challenges they had with the other brands, and paired those together.
So let me step back for a second. What led you to start going direct, trying to recruit existing franchisees of other systems? Like, what was the impetus for that?
Yeah, I think that to be very blunt and transparent with that is, I'll date myself. I've been in franchising for over 25 years, so we've always talked about it. But I think the most success that we had for my career has been with Unleashed Brands, and it was actually coming out of COVID when a lot of folks were not inquiring about franchising because of the nervousness of the business, and we began to target existing franchisees of similar type brands that understand family and community and the learn and grow and play category. And we were able to get to that franchisee through the data at we received from Fran Data that got us, and we knew our talking points. So it was a process. We were able to target them and really have a very quick intro meeting to respect their time. But it was probably some of the best leads once we got them through the intro part. But you can't just mail a mailer and think they're going to respond, or just send an email and hope they're going to open it. It was really, really understanding all of that with the candidates.
So, so basically what I heard from you is you started to go direct because you leads dried up, right? Like, and then, so how did you think about the type of franchisee to target, right? Like, the number of franchisees out there is large. Like, how did you get to the franchisee where whatever message, which we can talk about in a second, where that would resonate?
Yeah, so I think with, when we started the program, it was with Urban Air Adventure Parks, and you guys have so much data, so you can't really, tackle all the data at one time. So we had to really reduce the list, so to speak, of the target audience that we wanted. So we wanted to first target other franchise concepts that experience higher EBITDAs and maybe had even higher CapEx investments that that franchisee was accustomed to, as well as franchisees that really are understood being a part of the community. And it doesn't mean that they are in their particular location every day, but understands that part of the business and really engaged operators. That was a key thing with our business versus absentee owners. So we had success with targeting a very narrow, in the beginning, when we first launched the project, other early childhood care education centers. And it really took our growth that year when we launched it to a level that we weren't expecting it to happen. And it was exciting to see those type of owners and how we could help them continue with being a part of Unleashed Brands, continue to help build their business and their legacy by being one of our brands as a franchisee as well.
So I think what I heard from you is that you were looking for similar characteristics. So similar investment costs, similar like consumer base, and maybe similar sales levels. What was the thinking there with the?
Yeah, I think it's all of that. It's similar CapEx, similar EBITDA, similar industries or appeal to the families, but also the fact that they were facing in their minds and challenges to their business. They may have been tied down to their business more, and they wanted more freedom to the business. They wanted to be a part of a company that would help them work on the business, not just in the business. And that phrase is thrown around a lot in franchising, but we had true examples that they could turn to and experience that. So not only did we say it, then they talked to franchisees that were experiencing it, and they say, hey, there may be something to this. And many of our franchisees were in these brands or in similar brands in the same industries, and we were able to turn to them And that made it filled a huge gap where we were just saying that we could help them do that versus them actually talking to franchisees that were actually doing it. That helped out a lot as well.
So James, you touched on something that I want to dig into so badly because the thing I think in today's environment, just salespeople, I don't know. I'm going to use the word fear, but that might not resonate. There's this reservation around calling, right? Like, so, oh, it's cold. They don't know me. And I don't want to leave a bad impression. I actually hear that a lot.
Yeah.
And what I heard from you, I want to know what your full outreach efforts were and like why you chose those outreach efforts, and specifically your thinking around calling.
Yeah, I think that if anybody remembers from FLDC a few years ago, I'm a big Mike Weinberg fan in general, and he talks a lot about it. And I think where so many people fall short is they don't prepare up front to the target audience that they're calling. And I'm not saying that you should have a script, but you definitely should have your key bullets and your terminology down that's going to grab their attention. Because if you do get a phone call, you may sometimes have 5 minutes or 10 minutes to grab their attention to have a longer call. Recruiters and franchise recruiters in all companies don't, that's the number one thing. They would love for somebody just to call them and then they call them back or whatever. I will tell you, somebody that's a hunter, and there's some companies in franchising that have hunters on their staff. That means that's somebody that just calls and calls and calls and really thrives on that. If you have a hunter on your team, the results, it can lower your cost per sale. It can lower your timeline to close the franchise agreement, and it can raise the quality of franchisee you track to your business. And by that, attracting that high quality franchisee, they then bring other high quality franchisees to the table. So the bonus to this, Edith, and I haven't even told you this, is so many of these franchisees that we were able to track through this outreach have referred us to other friends and colleagues in their businesses that has then multiplied into additional franchise locations because the respect that they have for that particular operator. So it is, we had our talking points down. We had a narrow list that we focused on. And then when we started getting results, we basically leaned into that particular list and those operators. And then we had high quality service that we offered with them too. We showed them respect, and we really met with them in great detail to find out really what they were wanting out of the business. And they actually trusted us. They didn't think that it was just some salesperson calling them trying to sell a franchise. And it's really the approach that you take with them. Now, they still think that's what you're doing on the first call, maybe even the second call, but somewhere along the way, they begin to understand that we really do care about if it's the right fit for them or not. And so that is from the first initial, what we call intro call when we do these outreaches like this, all the way through the process.
And when you said other multi-unit operators kind of referred others, did you ask for that, or like how did that, or did it happen organically?
Yeah, that's a good point. What my history is, it happens organically. We have a referral program at Unleashed Brands like a lot of franchisors do, but that's not why people talk about it. They're at franchise conferences for that other brand, and they're sharing with people what they're doing now and vice versa. And they say, oh, really? So they are some of the best examples and validators that we have for our brand. So I think that's so important, is once you lean into that and leverage that. And, it depends on the brand and the industry you're looking at too. So we're really big at Unleashed on LinkedIn. And so you never know who may be reading the post of the new franchisee that you attracted from another brand. And that really is like, they have a lot of respect for that person. So they end up calling you as well with that. So that's what we found that really has success. Success breeds success. So I do want to say that it's not always like-minded franchise concepts that we attract. I mean, we have folks that are big in the fitness category, hotel category, Dunkin' it goes on and on. And then those franchisees have also introduced us to other franchisees. So the biggest compliment that we get is from our franchisees referring us to other folks. So it's one of our top lead sources, but you have to first get that one franchisee in the system, and it begins to increase.
I really hadn't noticed that Unleash was big on LinkedIn.
Oh, you haven't? Yeah.
Just kidding.
Aren't you funny?
So, I think if I remember correctly, you were mostly targeting kind of smaller franchisees.
Mhm.
Is that my recollection?
Yeah, yes. Mhm.
So, like when you think about this for recruiting kind of smaller franchisees, how do you think about adjusting your message, if you were to go after or do go after the larger operators?
Yeah, because we are doing both now, and it is a totally different audience, and you need to know your audience. So it's just like as many franchise concepts, and we've talked about this before, as a brand starts, it may have a lot of owner operators, and then as it matures, and then it has the multi-unit operators, and then one could dream to have, like Dunkin' has, of so many 5+ units and 10+ units. I think that's a natural with a brand that continues to evolve and continues to be innovative and relevant today and continue to move forward. You attract those more mature franchisees with that, but knowing your audience. So it's okay if they are in the early childhood education, they own 1 to 3 locations into that, and they're looking to diversify, knowing that particular future franchisee versus somebody that has 100 locations in Planet Fitness or something else, and knowing what they're looking for is crucial in this day and age. You can't approach the two the same.
It's interesting. I remember talking to a franchisee who used to own one early childhood education franchise, and then she almost credits that franchise for helping launch her into another childcare franchise, not childcare, but child-related business where she's been able to scale. So Somerset, it was viewed as like a graduation from one to the next level. So it sounds like you got really great reception by franchisees. Do you remember how many franchisees you actually kind of reached out to, or like where you got traction, or the results, basically anything along that spectrum?
Yeah, so I think that at this time, and it was a good training ground for one of our franchise recruiters that was fairly new into franchising at the time, and she worked with the company, but when she would transition into a new role, and there was a target of how many to reach out to outbound wise. So we were not only on LinkedIn and in messaging and through LinkedIn, but we were also emailing, but we were also calling, and I don't remember exactly but we had several hundred early childhood education franchisees on our list, and then we targeted that. And to be honest with you, we had a target of 5 to be able to convert over about a 6-month period into new franchisees. I believe we ended up doing 17 in that about 7-month period that first year. And it was the only lead source for this particular franchise recruiter. So their first, I think 9 or 10 months in the business with us, that was the only lead source that they worked with. And so, and we have an entire really good 8-step process that we put all our future franchisees through, and they followed it to a T. So it was they didn't have any, this particular recruiter didn't have any bad habits. They resisted getting on the phone at first. And because you do get a lot of people, I don't have time to talk to you, or you don't even get to the right person. And so it can be frustrating, but getting that one intro call to the right candidate, and then where our particular numbers may be, 10 intro calls, meaning qualified folks that reach out to us, or whatever your brands is, to a 5 intro calls to a signing. It's much better. The pipelines don't have to be as large as what I'm getting at to get the results for that piece of it. If you are going through the traditional franchise recruiting, whether it's through PR or through the ads, and we do all that too, and all the digital marketing and all that, the numbers are much higher as far as that you have to go through to get the numbers. Now, the overall numbers with the data from FranData may be a large list, but really then when you target it down, and we would target different parts of the country. We didn't try to target the entire country at one time. We targeted off markets that we knew that we could diversify into that market. And then we also researched that candidate as much as we could over and above the data that you supplied us, whether it's through LinkedIn, whether it's through just Googling them and trying to learn as much about the candidate before. So it does take time. So you can only do so much in a week's time with that.
How did you set this magic number of 5?
We
I'm
didn't-
always
there's
curious.
there's no real theory behind it, to be honest with you, Edith. I thought that this was a new recruiter. I thought this was time we were coming out of COVID. I did not have, I looked at what we paid for the list and I looked at the time that we were spending on this, and which it was, again, that it was one of our lowest cost per deal signing that we had as far as that goes.
So, how have your franchise development efforts progressed so far this year from a lead and a franchise sales perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think you see some differences, and we don't have to repeat everything we see on the news or what FranData reports at the conference of what the state of franchise world is in. But the good news is we are a little behind target for our year, but we've already awarded over 100 franchise agreements this year. We'll award a little over 200, I think around 213 before the year end between our brands. And that's should be right on budget. So in spite of high interest rates and different things going on in the economy, I mean, our largest CapEx investment is an urban air adventure park. And we have our growth coming from new franchisees. A large percentage of our franchisees, and I mentioned this earlier, because once they are in the system, they do become multi-unit operators. So over 61% of our franchisees are multi-unit operators. And the term that we use, MUMBOs, multi-unit, multi-brand, our MUMBOs are people that are MUMBOs just within our system. We have lots of franchisees that own other brands, but 8% own multiple brands in the Unleashed platform. And we're real proud of that number as it's growing as well. So, that's one of the things that we're real excited about with the business. So our franchisees want to own the kids market. So they may be in the fitness world or the early childhood care or automotive or hotel business, but they really buy into the vision we have at Unleashed Brands. So owning that kids market, and with the support and the systems and the processes we put in place there, they really buy into what we're doing. So it's not uncommon for one of our franchisees to own multiple brands in the same market and really maximize their efforts. By our customer in most of our markets is mom, and the kids are the users. And we want to take the kiddos from birth to college, basically, along the Candyland Monopoly board and own that piece of it. So Little Gym, they can start as early as 4 months and then go all the way through to Class 101 on college prep. And franchisees really enjoy that piece of it too. So that's been exciting for us as well.
I read an article the other day that said mumbo jumbo or mumbo jumble. Yes, multi-unit operator, multi-brand. So from 2 more questions for you, James, and then I want to turn to Eric. How would you say that franchise development has changed? Right, like I think it's funny, we're showing Dunkin'. You actually are used to work for one of the brands that co-owned. So like, how have you seen it change over the years?
Oh, it's changed a lot. I mean, I got my start even at the Dwyer Group when it was not even the Dwyer Group. So I joke that I was in franchising before the internet was around. So it's changed a lot since then, and that aspect. But the biggest thing that has changed is the access to information. And so most candidates, whether they're first-time operators or they're mature operators looking to diversify their portfolio, has done lots of research on your brand before they even reach out to you. And they also have researched your competition. And if we think they haven't, we're fooling ourselves. So being able to know that, and now that's good and bad. So it's the great stories, but it also could be some stories out there that aren't always all true, and you need to get the opportunity to share your story and share it the right way. But I think that's the number one thing. There are more opportunities and good opportunities in franchising than ever before. I think that that's second to none. That there's lots of good opportunities. So why is somebody going to select your brand over another brand with that? So culture is very important to franchise candidates, no matter what level of franchise, and the whole mindset and business concept is very important as well. And being able to exit out of that business and how that's going to look is very important to franchisees.
And I'll say the opposite to what you said is prospects have a lot of information on your brands, but I think as you mentioned earlier, you have a lot of information on them too.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a different dynamic for both when you kind of know a little bit more about each other.
Yes, that's true. And it does. And I tell you, it's so important, Edith, when you know something about that candidate that you're calling, whether it's what their business or what they may have done before, you can build a lot of rapport and a lot of respect from them because they think, hey, this individual is taking the time to learn a little bit about me before reaching out to me. And that will get you a meeting a lot faster than just casually cold calling or one of the hundreds of LinkedIn emails that we get that are just copy and pasted every time. Being able to speak to something that shows you know something about that candidate goes a long way.
So my last question for you is what are your top tips to franchisors and to suppliers who are feeling stuck or having a difficulty filling their pipeline?
Yeah, I think it's being prepared for your audience and upfront. So many of us just, in the past, just jump on a call and haven't prepared. And so no matter where our inquiries come from, we really encourage our franchise recruiting team to do some research on that candidate and on their area before they just go through the motions of doing a call, if that makes sense. And so I think knowing your audience is so critical, and knowing really what kind of franchisee that you're really wanting to be a part of your system. We're a high growth franchise platform company, but we do turn people down for the franchise. And we also go through our 8-step process, and many franchise candidates may self-select out before we even get far in the process, or so we like to go through the process before we select them out. But that's very critical. We have solid controlled growth, but at a high growth rate. So we want to attract the highest quality franchisees that we can, and that's why we go as much detail as we do. I mean, our discovery days, which we call launch days, are 2 full days, and they're in person. And we do that because it's so important for us to get to know the candidate, but for the candidate to get to know us as well.
Thank you very much. I'm sure Eric is over here busting at the seams to
That's
share
right.
his story. So, Eric, let me turn our attention to you. So tell me a little bit about your department and what it looks like from a staffing perspective.
Yeah, no problem. James, great job. It was really insightful, some of the stuff you were saying there. So at The Joint, we are a regional developer model. So we do have 16, let's call it, people in the field that are responsible for this territory in terms of franchise development, real estate, construction, and then ongoing support. And in those non-RD territories, we have about 2 corporate people, corporate salespeople. We have franchise sales administration. So all in all, with real estate, construction, and we do have corporate clinics. So we have 965 units open, 130 of those are corporate. So all of that falls under me. So I have about 11 people directly under me.
So you are a larger brand, and can you tell us a little bit about your focus for growth? Because your clinics all over the place.
All over the place. And it's interesting for us, we're a chiropractic brand. So we have, I think, a couple of more speed bumps in the maybe awareness process. If you take a look at your sales funnel, that awareness piece at the top of the funnel, where people need to understand that we are a franchise, right? And you could be a franchisee of a chiropractic brand. You don't have to be a DC or a chiropractor to be a franchisee. It's another one. And then we have a whole other separate thing, which is the professional corporation in half the states, which we don't need to get into now. But once you get past all of that, which is through a lot what James was saying in terms of making sure that you educate people maybe away from yourself, like in those areas where they are looking for information on your brand and they understand, how we would pop up maybe under health and wellness and things like that, and give people an opportunity to look at something different. We have been, I think, pretty successful over the years in terms of generating leads in all sorts of categories, right? At 27% of our network are actually chiropractors. A majority of our network are business people, are typical franchisees that might own 3 to 7 units. We do have those, I wouldn't say private equity, more like home office, family, high net worth individuals that own 20, 30, 60 clinics. So I think to James' point, when you're trying to attract all of these types of franchisees, you really need to be prepared to talk in all sorts of different ways. What's interesting to doctors is not interesting maybe to the home office group. They have a totally different mindset in terms of what they're looking for a franchise. And if you're not, I would say, building infrastructure correctly to be able to speak to that, meaning a really detailed item 19, just a lot of stuff that you have in your disclosure documents so you can freely talk about your brand to these different categories. And for us, we're a public company. It's really funky being a public company because there's a firewall between our earnings calls and all those information that you can get publicly versus what is disclosed in your item 19, and they can't necessarily mesh. So you walk this interesting fine line in terms of what you can say and what you can't say, even though everything's public. So our sales process is 8 steps, probably very similar to James. To me, I think one of the most, I don't know, tell me if I'm not answering your question, but I'm just gonna run here.
No, this is, so what's great is
you
were telling us that you have a very diverse target audience.
Yeah.
So that was exactly what I was looking for.
All right, cool. And for me, as you're talking to these people, I think it's, step 3 in our process is the fact-finding call, because to me, there's everybody is telling you what you need to know as long as you listen. And they'll tell you their objections. They'll tell you what their fears are. They'll tell you everything you need to know, and allows you to prepare for the balance of the sales process, the webinar and the FD disclosure and the validation, to really calm people's concerns and focus them on a decision day based on information that they want to know, what they want to hear, and how they want to communicate. So to me, that's a big piece of the process right there.
So because you have such a diverse franchisee base, from single unit operators all the way up to family offices, what led you to start going direct to existing franchisees?
Yeah, so we were always looking at our originally, when we really started to our beginning growth, like in 2010, let's say 14, we were heavily, a lot of our franchisees already came from other health and wellness brands for whatever reason. So we were already leveraging them on those franchisees that had maybe 2 to 3 other units from other brands. and identifying those franchisees based on who was already in our system. So if we had some of these brands that are on this slide, we would focus on those companies. We had somebody they can talk to that they probably knew. So we really dove deep into that. But really, the bigger picture came when we're looking at these mumbos and the information that we really focused on with you, Edith, on those playbooks is when we started our refranchising project. We're selling all 130 of our corporate clinics, and a lot of these are clustered in areas. So people could look at 12, 20, 30, 50 units if they wanted to in a real concentrated area. So we wanted to identify a lot of these bigger franchisees that have the capital, that have the know-how, that have the ability to really maybe absorb some of the costs that a typical franchisee might not be able to do. So we really turned our attention first to the health and wellness space, those bigger franchisees, maybe in the Planet Fitness world and the Orange Theory world. But then, once COVID started to hit, we really saw that these multi-unit, multi-brand operators in the food space were really finally looking at other industries to diversify their portfolio for lots of reasons that James mentioned, not to mention that we were also a essential brand. So during that time, so it really was, we were able to hit some pain points, I think, in a lot of our marketing material to attract these types of, to attract and also to speak through a lot of the pain points that they had in terms of food costs or employees, or they were built out in their respective brands. So we were just able to do, I think, speak their language and put some buzzwords in there that they were looking for in a lot of our email campaigns and specific targeting stuff.
So give me some of that. Give me some more details there. So what were your outreach efforts, and what was that messaging? What were those buzzwords?
Yeah, we didn't just first call. We definitely did an email campaign that allowed, at least for our sake, we allowed people to know that, hey, we got these refranchise units. I think a big buzzword is just for a lot of these bigger franchisees, in my experience, is that they're looking for open and operating units first, and then they'll grow into the new development. So the ability to have them understand, hey, listen, we have cash flowing stuff available in areas that you are in. I think that's a big piece of it. And the ability to grow into additional areas once they get their footing under them. I think, we are very low employees. We have DCs and doctors. So it's not just hiring high school kids, maybe, who are working in the units. So there's a little bit of sophistication there. We have no cost of goods. So some of those specific things that might be tough for some of their current businesses, we made sure that they understood that in our case, it's a little bit easier.
I've heard a theme that both of you guys talked about, which is just an obvious thing. I think for some people, when you step back in sales, it's all about pain points, right? And so both of you talked about speaking to these operators' possible pain points that they're experiencing. So Eric, you might have shared with me, what was the open rate on that initial email that you sent out?
We had on the original piece that we sent out, first one, it was our first go at this. We wanted to put something out there that people can relate to in terms of those bigger franchisees. It was like 43% open rate. And I was shocked at it, to be honest. I didn't know what to expect. This was because of the refranchising effort. That's when we really were targeting these bigger multi-unit operators. And we had a really good people going deep into our sales process. And then when you're looking at these bigger tranches of clinics, you got to put together SIM packages and all this other stuff that makes the sales process a little longer than typical. I think when you're looking at maybe a 3-pack or 5-pack on new development. So we're still pushing through a lot of these people. Now they're starting to come to discovery days, which we're specifically tailoring towards, because again, what they're interested in is different than what your 3 to 5 unit person buying is interested in. We really focused on marketing, on recruiting, on innovation, what's happening in the future. If I'm going to buy your stores, how are you going to immediately give me an ROI and grow my my top line sales from there. What's next kind of stuff. So we tailored some of our discovery, we tailored our discovery days to match what these people are really focusing on. And construction, they got it handled. Operations outside of just our specific operations, they have a lot of that handled. So we really focused on some different things that they wanted to talk about.
I love that. James mentioned culture. Do you bring that? Is that part of the conversation too?
Yeah. I don't know if it's a huge focus for us outside of maybe we're really interested in the thought leadership perspective. What can you guys bring to us in terms of these other brands? I'm huge on what's going on everywhere. What am I missing? How can we incorporate what's working somewhere else into our stuff? So that to me, from a culture, collaboration, all of that, I think is important. I think these multi-unit, multi-brand operators who are in that big number of unit space, they want to showcase what they've been able to do, what made them successful, and have a franchisor allow them to do that within the parameters, obviously, of the agreement and the policies and stuff. So I think that's a big piece of it.
I love that. So just showing your ideas matter, right? What your experience actually matters to us. And that is very much culture. And so you also have an impressive experience in franchising. You also worked for a very fast growing brand. Was that your first franchising gig?
My first I was attempt to hire a Mailbox Etc. UPS store way back when. Yeah.
So
they kept me.
Fast growing brand in its day. What, in the 80s? 70? No.
Me?
So anyway.
Close.
How would you say that franchise development has changed?
I know, James said it really clear in terms of there's a lot of information on our brand, on everybody's brand, on whatever is out there, especially if you're a public company. The big thing I think is people want to, and this is a good thing. I think the more they know, the faster they're going to go through your process. So don't be afraid, I think, to put a lot of things out there if you can control the narrative. So I have charts and graphs in pretty colors in my FDD and item 19, so I can copy and paste that and put that everywhere. So your storytelling ability, I think, is extremely important. I think having those little short videos everywhere, probably people are sick of me when I pop up in the first part of their LinkedIn or Facebook. I know my wife is for sure. When she opens up her stuff, she deletes it right away. But I think that's a big piece of it. Just being out there, trying different things. There's no silver bullet. And
you mentioned infrastructure, and you had said some other things to me about other infrastructure that's important to you.
Yeah. I think making sure that you're prepared, okay, so you have all these people that you're advertising to and these people are talking to, but not being able to finance them and making sure you have different financing programs for the people coming in, because these multi-unit operators are probably not going to want SBA. So do you have something, they probably have their own financing, but maybe you need to make sure your fund score that Frandata provides is out there, because these multi-unit operators understand a lot of what that stuff is. Making sure that you have your bank credit report, so the maybe the banks that the multi-unit brand operators are already work with, that they understand your model, they understand especially if you're a PC brand or a chiropractic brand. That's important. I think, obviously making sure your real estate inventory is up to date so you can get off running when you have new sales and stuff like that. So to me, building your item 19, that you can talk to the different people that you're trying to attract, because again, the information is different. The ability to make sure these people get financing for whatever source that they want to get to, have that transparency into your brand and model. Is so important, and is so important, I think.
So one last question for you. In how have your franchise development efforts progressed so far this year from a lead and franchise sales perspective?
Yeah. And it's, I would tell you, we're a little bit under budget overall. First quarter, we hit right on budget in terms of franchise sales. Second quarter dropped. Third quarter is looking that we're going to hit, if not go past our budget. Now, being public, I got to be careful because of guidance, but I think we're going to be I think we're going to have a similar year as we had the last couple of years. So I don't think we're going to see a big drop off of by any means. We're having from a lead generation perspective, it's our best year since like 2021, 2022.
Incredible. Wow. Okay. You guys just have such a wealth of information, and I feel like I'm cheating the audience because we have 5 minutes to get questions from the audience. So, Sydney, do you want to take a look at our Q&A? All right, hold on a second.
Yes. Yeah, so I pulled some in the chat that were coming in. Amy Siegel asked, as a brand without a national name or presence, what's the best way to grow the business in a profitable and safe manner for our franchisees?
Who would like to grab that?
I could just take a quick step. I think there's a lot of franchisees that are out there that are looking for something new. I think they're looking to get into the ground floor in terms of growth. So I think that could be a very attractive opportunity for people who are in, I think, maybe similar industries, that they can expand their portfolio with some new and exciting stuff and bring their expertise to that brand. So I think identifying franchisees in maybe the 3 to 10 unit space is a good opportunity to market to.
Yeah, I think that it's spot on, Eric. I think it's really, again, no matter what your franchise concept is, and at Unleashed Brands, we have brands that have been in business for 45 and 47 years, and we have brands that have been in for 2 years. And you have some candidates that really gravitate towards being early adopters to new and emerging brands, and other candidates that really like the maturity and as long as a brand continues to innovate and be relevant today. So knowing that upfront and understanding that with the potential or future franchisee is very important when you're attracting franchisees.
Perfect. I think we have time for just one more question. And any questions that we can't get to, I will definitely share with the speakers so they can possibly reach out to you guys separately. So the last one, Eileen Hember asked, at which point in your process do you provide the FDD?
Yeah, great question. I think that's always so if it's a mature franchisee of another brand that understands FDDs and wants to cut to the chase and get that, as we all know, they can go to a couple of websites and pull them down real quick if they want to. So we don't have a problem sending it out right away. In our normal franchise process, it's out of our, referred to earlier, our 8-step process. It's normally at step 4 in our process. So it's after we've had a few meetings with them, get to know them, they get to know us. We know high level that they meet our financial qualifications, and we continue to go through the process that way.
Yeah,
So
very similar.
Oh,
sorry. Go right. No, I mean,
I was just I appreciate your both of you have such wisdom, and I just wanted to wrap up. I know Eric used this term playbooks, so I thought I would actually showcase what a playbook is. It is key information on franchise owners, all of their full contact details, emails, LinkedIn when possible, Facebook if they have, and then information about who they are. When did they start in business? Are they a key important franchisee? This is a real life franchisee that I'm showing you. The names are different and you don't get to see all the details. Mm-hmm. But the point is that really, understanding who franchisee prospects are helps you to create that conversation that's going to resonate, as both James and Eric mentioned. So thank you, everybody, for making this the most attracted Franchise Wednesday Wise webinar. Thank you so much to Eric and James for your insights. And yeah, we will collaborate on trying to answer some of your questions and disseminating that back out.
Perfect. Thank you guys
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you to everyone for joining. And again, the recording will be emailed out to all registrants and attendees. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly and I can direct those to Eric, Edith, or James. But I hope everyone has a great rest of your day and has a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Guys, bye.